The blanket is still folded the way I folded it that first night. Gray wool. Army issue, the kind they sold off cheap after the wars. With a black stripe along one end, and a small burn near the corner from a coal that jumped a stove 40 years ago. Somewhere I don't remember. I kept it in the chest, at the foot of my bed, and once a year, in the cold months, I'd take it out and shake the dust off it, and put it back. My wife knew not to wash it. She knew not to ask. She is gone now too. Almost everyone is, so I am telling you. Because the blanket should belong to someone who knows what it is for, and there is no one left who was there. And a man my age, sitting where I sit, this much winter behind him. A man like that has nothing to spend but the truth. Her name was Wingyong Owangela in our tongue. After, that is the name I gave her. And she kept it before on the paper they had in the prison office. She was Mary Halloran. Mary, with no middle name. I saw the page once. I saw a lot of pages once. I will get to it. She had a chip out of her front tooth, the right one, upper. You could only see it when she smiled, and she did not smile much in the beginning. And then later, she smiled a great deal. Not in a girl's way. Like a woman who has decided. That is where I want to start. Not at the prison. Not at the night we rode out. At her smile, because that is what I keep. The rest is just how we got there. I was 44 years old that summer. I want to say that clearly because young men do this kind of thing all the time and no one tells the story. An old man of 44 does it once, and he carries it. I had been chief of our band for 9 years by then. Not the kind of chief the newspapers liked. The kind that signs things and wears the coat they give him. The other kind. The kind that watches his people get smaller every winter and feels it in his own teeth. We were on a piece of land north and east of the Black Hills, on what they were calling the agency then, after the second treaty, the one that was not a treaty, just a paper. We had cattle, some of us, the ones who learned to call them cattle instead of the old word. I had a horse, a roan called Mato, which is bear, because he was bad-tempered, and would bite a man for nothing. I had a wife who had been my wife since I was 19, and she was 17, and we had a son who was almost grown, and a daughter who had died of fever the winter before, and a small house of squared logs with a stove in it that my wife was proud of. I tell you this because I want you to understand. I was not a lonely man. I was not looking. I was a man with a life, and the life was hard, but it was mine, and I had no quarrel with it. This is important. This is the only way the rest of it makes sense. It started with a horse, not Mato, a bay mare, 4 years old, white sock on the right foreleg, belonged to a Mikowoju man named Standing Bull, who was a cousin of my wife on her mother's side. The mare was stolen out of his corral one night. In the 7th month, the moon when the choke cherries are black, and Standing Bull came to me because I was the chief, and because the tracks went south and west toward the white town, and a Lakota man who follows tracks into a white town in 1881 is a man who may not come out. So I went with him, me and 2 others. We followed the prince for a day and a half, and we found the mare in a livery, on the edge of a town I will not name, because the town does not matter, because the town is gone now anyway. Burned in '06, I heard, by men who were not us. The mare was there. So was the man who took her. He was a small white man, with a rash on his neck, and very pale eyes, and he had already sold the mare to the liveryman, which made things complicated. Standing Bull paid the liveryman what he asked, which was thieves' work, but we did it, because we had come too far not to ride out with the mare. And while we were standing there in the livery yard, arguing about the price, the woman walked past on the boardwalk on the other side of the street. I want to say, I felt something. I did not. I noticed her, because she was being walked between 2 men in dark coats, and her hands were bound in front of her, and there was a piece of muslin tied around her hair like a kerchief, and she was barefoot. That is what I noticed. Barefoot in the street, in a town with horses and broken glass and worse. I noticed her feet. She was looking down. I did not see her face. One of the men in dark coats hit her between the shoulder blades with the flat of his hand to make her walk faster, and she stumbled. And that was when she looked up. Not at him, across the street, at nothing. Her eyes passed over me, and the two men and Standing Bull, and the bay mare, without registering any of it. The way a person looks at a wall when they are trying to be inside their own head and not where their body is. She had a chip out of her upper tooth on the right side. You could see it because her mouth was a little open from the blow, breathing through it. That was all. They walked her on past, around the corner of the feed store, and the men in coats turned her north up the alley and out of sight, and Standing Bull was tugging on my sleeve because the liveryman wanted his money, and we settled it and we rode out. I thought about her 3 times on the way home. Once when we crossed the creek. Once when we made camp. When I lay down to sleep and my wife was breathing beside me, and I was looking at the ceiling of our little log house, thinking about a woman I had seen for 9 seconds in a street, in a town I did not even like. I did not tell my wife. There was nothing to tell. It would have ended there. It should have ended there. A man sees a sad thing in a white town and rides home and forgets, because if he remembers every sad thing in a white town, he will go mad before the snow comes. But then I had to go back. 3 weeks later. Treaty business. The agent wanted me at his office to put my mark on a paper about beef rations, which was a paper that meant they were going to give us less beef and call it our idea. I went because I had to. I went alone because I did not want any of my young men in that office. They get angry, an angry Lakota. Men in white offices is how people end up dead. I went on motto. I tied him outside the agent's building, and I went in and I sat in a hot room with a man named Pritchett, who had a very wet handshake. And I listened to him explain why our beef was being cut, and I signed nothing. And I told him I would think about it, which was a lie we both understood. And then I came out, and I needed water, for me and for the horse. So I walked Mado, down 2 streets, the public trough by the railhead, and let him drink, and I drank from the pump beside it. And that was when I heard the bell. Sunday. It was Sunday, I had forgotten. White Men's Day. The bell up at the church on the hill ringing the women in. And on the other end of town, behind a wall I had not noticed before, behind a stone wall about the height of 2 men, there was another bell. Smaller, flatter, and it rang, too. Not the same time, after, as if it was answering. I asked the man at the pump what the second bell was. He spat tobacco juice between his boots and said, "That'd be the women's prison. They ring 'em in for service same as us. Different building. Same God, I guess," he laughed. I did not. I led Mato a little way down the road, past the back of the feed store, around the corner of the alley, where I had seen the men in dark coats turn, her north, and there at the end of it was the wall. Gray stone, mortared rough, a wooden gate, a guard sitting on a barrel beside it with a shotgun across his knees, and his hat over his eyes, asleep or pretending to be. I stood there in the dust with my horse, and I did the arithmetic. She had been on the street 3 weeks before, walked between 2 men in coats, bound, going north up that alley. She was in there. I knew it the way you know a thing in your chest before your head agrees. The way you know the weather is going to turn even though the sky has not changed yet. I stood there until the guard shifted on his barrel, and then I moved on. Because a Lakota man staring at a prison wall in a white town is a man who has already drawn attention, and I had not yet decided what I was going to do. I did not even know her name. I rode home that night, and I did not sleep. My wife asked me what was wrong, and I said the agent, the beef, which she accepted because it was also true. But it was not the whole truth, and I think she knew, because she did not ask again, which was her way of letting me come to it. I lay awake, and I thought about the barefoot woman with the chipped tooth, and I asked myself what business of mine she was. White woman, white prison, white trouble, not my road, and the answer my chest kept giving me was, she looked at the wall. When the man hit her, she looked at the wall across the street, the way a person looks who has decided the body is the body, and they are not in it anymore. I had seen that look before. I had seen it on a boy of 12 at Fort Robinson. The winter crazy horse was killed. sitting on the ground with his hands tied, looking at a wagon wheel like the wagon wheel was the only thing in the world. I had seen it on my own mother once when I was small, in a tent that smelled of whiskey and a man who was not my father. I had seen it on women in our own camp, after raids, after winters, after losses too big to put into the body, so they put them outside it. That look is not a white look or a red look. It is a human look. It is the look of a person who has been hurt past where hurt can be held, and is keeping themselves alive by going somewhere else inside. I had seen it on her, and I had ridden away. That was the part I could not get past. I went back the next Sunday. I did not tell my wife. I told her there was a man I needed to see about a saddle in the next town over, which was a thin lie, and she let me have it. She was good that way. She trusted me to come home. I rode in early before the bells. I tied Mato at the back of a Lutheran church, 3 streets from the prison wall, because a horse tied at a church on Sunday is a horse no one looks at twice. I walked. I had on a hat, pulled low in an old canvas coat I had taken off a freighter in a card game years before, and from a distance, with my hair tied up under the hat, I was just another tall man with a brown face. The town had Mexicans. The town had a Chinese launderer. I could pass for the morning if I did not speak. I walked the wall, all 4 sides of it, slow, like a man going somewhere. Stone, 10 feet, mortared rough but not new. There were cracks, places where the mortar had crumbled and not been refilled. The gate I had seen before was the main one. On the back side, north, away from the town, there was a smaller gate. Oak boards, padlocked from outside, that I guessed was for hauling out night soil, and bringing in coal. There were no windows on the outside of the wall. The building inside was 2 stories of gray brick, with bars set into narrow windows, and from the alley I could see the upper row, 6 of them, evenly spaced. I counted the steps from the back gate to the nearest place a horse could stand unseen. 42 steps to the corner of a feed warehouse with a loading dock. Behind the loading dock, 3 more steps. You were on a dirt track that ran north out of town, between 2 empty lots and joined the river road a 1/4 mile up. I memorized it. I have a memory for ground. Most of my people did in those days. It was how we stayed alive. Then I went around to the front, where the main gate was, and I waited for the bell. When it rang, the gate opened. 2 guards came out first with shotguns. Then a line of women, I counted 23, in gray dresses 2 by 2, ankles not chained but wrists in front, walking with their heads down, escorted by 4 more guards and a woman in a black dress, with a white collar and a ring of keys at her belt. The woman in the black dress was the matron. She was a large woman, not fat, broad. Shoulders like a man's. Iron gray hair pulled back so tight. Her forehead looked stretched. She had a face you would call handsome if you did not know her. Once you knew her, you would never call it that again. There was a quality to the way she walked behind the women in gray dresses that I recognized immediately, because I had seen it in cavalry officers, and in mission school teachers, and in a certain kind of Lakota man too, the kind who liked having a stick in his hand. The walk of a person who is enjoying the day. The line came past me. I had my hat down. I was leaning on the front of a closed barber shop, like a man waiting for it to open. She was the 11th woman, counted from the front. She had shoes now, wooden clogs, the kind they gave them, that made the line sound like a slow drum on the boardwalk. Her hair was cut. They had cut it short, to her ears ragged, the way you cut a sheep. She was thinner than 3 weeks before. There was a yellow bruise along her jaw, fading, and a fresh red one at the corner of her mouth, which I understood later was from the day before. Saturday, because Saturday was the day before Sunday, and Sunday was the day they cleaned them up for church. She walked past me with her eyes down. She did not see me. There was no reason she should have. I waited until the line went into the church at the end of the street. I waited an hour and a quarter while they were inside. Then I waited while they came out and walked back. I stood in 3 different places so the guards would not mark me as one man in one spot. Lutheran church, then a hitching rail near the bank, then the porch of the hotel, where I bought a cup of coffee with a nickel and drank it slowly. Nobody spoke to me. Of my hat and the way I held my shoulders said do not. And people in those towns understood that language, whoever you were. When the line came back, the matron stopped them just inside the prison gate. I could see through the gap before it closed. She was speaking to one of the women, not Mary, another one, smaller, dark-haired, and then she struck her, open hand, hard, across the face, and the woman fell, and the matron stood over her and said something to the whole line, loud, that I could not hear the words of, but could hear the shape of. Then the gate closed. I went back to my horse. I rode home. I did not eat that night. My wife asked me again, I said. The saddleman had not been there. She let me alone. I went back the next Sunday, and the Sunday after that. 4 Sundays in a row. Each time I learned a little more. The guard rotation. The fact that the matrons lived inside the prison. There was a stovepipe coming out of the north wall above the back gate that smoked every morning, and her shadow passed across an upper window when the lamp was lit before dawn. The fact that one of the day guards, a big slow man with a sandy mustache, took a pull from a flask twice an hour from the second hour after noon onward, and by sundown was no use to anybody. The fact that on Sunday after the church walk, the matron took the women back inside one at a time, by name, into a side room off the courtyard. And what happened in that room I could hear, faintly, from the alley behind the wall, because the side room had a high window, with the glass broken out of one corner and stuffed with rags. What happened in that room was that the matron beat them. Not all of them, some. The ones she had picked that week. Sunday was the day. I do not know why Sunday. Maybe because they had just been to church, and she felt she could. Maybe because the rest of the week she had to share them with the other guards, and Sunday afternoon she had them to herself. Maybe she did not know why either and just did it. The third Sunday I went, I heard Mary. I knew it was Mary because I heard the matron say her name first, very clearly, through the broken corner of the window. Halloran, and then a sound I will not describe to you. And that sound went on longer than the sounds for the other women had. And when I rode home that night, I rode hard enough that Motto was foaming, and my wife took one look at me when I came in and went into the bedroom and shut the door. That was the night I decided. I want to say I decided out of justice, out of a clean thing. I did not. I decided out of something older and meaner than justice. I decided because I had heard a woman make a sound that no person should make, and I had ridden away from it on a horse. A man who can do that twice is not a man, I decided. And then I had to figure out how. I did not do it alone. I want to say that too, because the story would be cleaner if I had. But it would also be a lie. And lies are how all of this got built in the first place. There was a man named Ohingniung, always, who was my wife's younger brother, 26, fast on a horse and quiet in a fight, and he had ridden with me before. There was a Métis named Joseph Beausoleil, half French, half Cree, ran horses across the line into Canada and back and had a road north that nobody else knew. And there was an old man in our band named Shunk Manitou, Wolf, who was past 70 and could no longer ride hard but who had been in the greasy grass and at Slim Buttes and could think about a problem the way most people cannot, which was without his own pride in it. I told the 3 of them. I told them what I had seen and heard and what I meant to do. I did not ask, I told, and then I waited. Wolf spoke first. He said Hochschila, boy. He still called me that, though I was almost an old man myself. He said, if you do this, the agency will say we did it, not you, we, the band. He said, even if we are not found out, even if no one ever knows it was a Lakota who took her, they will know a woman went over the wall, and they will look at us first, because they always look at us first. And if they find her with you, they will hang you and burn us out. I said I knew that too, he said. Then why? And I said the only thing I had, because I heard her, uncle, and I cannot stop hearing her. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, then we will help you, but we will help you correctly. And he laid out, in the way old men lay things out, exactly how it had to go. Not on a Sunday. Sunday they would be watching. Not on a Saturday. Saturday the matron was awake, late, drinking. Tuesday, before dawn, quiet. Through the back gate, not over the wall. Coal hauler's gate. Padlock cut, not broken. Broken makes noise. Cut with a long file. Makes only a sound, like a man clearing his throat in another room. One horse, waiting in the alley. 3 horses, at the warehouse. Joseph North with the spare mounts at the river crossing, 4 miles up, by the time the sun came. Her in a coat, not a dress. A man's coat over the gray and a hat, and from any distance she would be a small man riding. And, Wolf said, "You will not kill the matron. You will be tempted. You will not. Because if you kill her, they will not stop until they find us. If you only take the woman, they will look. They will get tired. Because to them the woman is worth less than the trouble." To them, he looked at me. "Not to you." I said I would not kill her. I almost kept my word. We did it on a Tuesday in the 9th month, the moon when the leaves turn yellow. It had rained for 2 days before, hard, and the alley behind the prison was thick mud, which Joseph said was good because mud does not echo. He had brought the file. He had brought a coat, a man's brown wool coat, too big for any woman, which was the point, and a felt hat with the sweatband stained dark. He had brought a small pair of scissors, which surprised me until I understood why. Always, and I went in. Wolf stayed at the warehouse with the horses. Joseph stayed at the river, crossing with the spare mounts, and a fresh horse for her, a steady one, a gelding called Smoke, who had been across the line 11 times and did not spook. The padlock took me 20 minutes with the file, always crouched beside me with a knife loose in his hand, watching the alley. The guard at the front gate could not see the back gate. The matron, we knew from watching, slept from midnight to 4. The 2 night guards inside the wall walked the courtyard on a circuit that brought them past the back gate once every 20 minutes or so, and we had counted 3 circuits and waited until just after the 3rd had passed. The lock came free. I caught it in my hand before it could fall in the mud. I set it down soft, on a rag I had brought for the purpose. We pushed the gate. It opened inward 6 inches, 10 enough. We slid in. We closed it behind us most of the way, not all, because a closed back gate at 4 in the morning would be the first thing a returning guard would notice. The courtyard was empty, lamp burning low above the matron's door at the north end of the building. Coal smell, piss smell, lie, from the laundry on the east side. 1 dog somewhere on the next street barking at nothing. The women slept in long rooms on the 2nd floor, in 2 rows of cots, 10 on one side and 9 on the other. I knew this because Joseph had a man inside the prison who hauled the coal. A black freedman named Edward who did not like the matron, and who had not been told what we were doing, but had been asked, over whiskey, where the women slept, which bed was Mary Halloran's. And Edward had told us because Edward was a man who asked the right question, gave the right answer. She was in the 2nd row from the door, 3rd bed. The stairs up to the women's floor were stone, and they had a creak in the 4th step from the top that Edward had also told us about. I skipped it, always skipped it. The door at the top was not locked. The door downstairs was locked, and they did not believe the women would come out of their beds in the night, because the matron was the matron. And we went in, 23 women sleeping. A small lamp turned very low at the far end of the room. The smell of women who have not been allowed to bathe properly in a long time. One of them coughed in her sleep, and I felt my hand go to the knife at my belt before I knew it was moving. I went to the 3rd bed in the 2nd row. She was on her side, facing the wall, knees drawn up. Hair shorter than the last time I had seen it. The matron had cut it again. There was a scab on the back of her neck where the scissors had bit her when she had cut it. I do not know how I knew it was a scissors bite and not something else. I just did. I knew her, by then, from the back of her head in lamplight, the way you know a horse from its withers. I knelt beside her. I put my hand over her mouth before I shook her, very lightly, just my fingertips on her shoulder. Her eyes opened. They went wide. She did not move. She looked at my face above her in the dark, and she did not move, and she did not make a sound, and I knew then that this was a woman who had taught herself, over a long time, never to startle, because startling brought consequences. I leaned down. I said, very low into her ear, in English, the words I had practiced for 2 weeks. I am here to take you out. Do not speak. Stand up. Walk where I walk. If you do not want to come, blink twice and I will go. I lifted my hand from her mouth. She did not blink twice. She sat up. She put her bare feet on the cold floor. She stood. She was small. Smaller than I had thought, when I had only seen her at a distance, walking, and I am tall, 6 feet and an inch, and standing next to her in the dark room. I felt for a moment the enormous strangeness of the thing doing, always was at the door. He nodded me on. We went out, down the stairs, skipping the 4th from the top, across the courtyard, along the wall in the shadow of the building, to the back gate. Through it, I pulled it shut behind us, the cut padlock back through the hasp, so that at a glance in the dark it looked closed. In the alley, in the mud, I gave her the coat. She put it on without a word. It came to her knees. I gave her the hat. She put it on. I gave her my hand and she took it. We walked, not ran, to the warehouse 42 steps away. Wolf had the horses, 3 of them. Matron and Always Bay, and a small chestnut for her that we would change out at the river for smoke. Wolf had her up in the saddle before I had mine, lifting her like she weighed nothing, which she nearly did, and arranging her so that from any window she would be a small rider in a brown coat with a hat low, and that was all. We rode out of the alley at a walk, north up the dirt track between the empty lots, onto the river road. We did not go fast until we were a half-mile clear of town. Then we went faster, but not as fast as I wanted to. She did not say one word for 2 hours. At the river crossing, Joseph was waiting in the willows with the spare mounts and a fire he had let burn, down to coals. We switched horses. He looked at her, and he looked at me, and he said in French, which she did not speak, mon ami, "You have done a thing now." And I said, "I know." She heard the tone of it. She looked at me. The first words she ever said to me were these, she said. "You are an Indian," I said. "Yes," she said. I thought I was dreaming. And then she put her face in her hands. And she did not cry. She made a sound smaller than crying, a sound like a person who has forgotten how, and we rode on. We took her north and west, not back to my own camp, because the agency would search there first. Wolf had thought of this too. There was a man we knew, a Lakota of the Sahasapa band, Blackfoot in your tongue, who lived on a piece of high broken country near the edge of what was still ours, a man named Tukankasio, Buffalo Grouse, who owed me a debt from a winter long before, and who had said to me once, "If you ever need a place no one will look, my place is that place." We rode 3 days. We rode at night, mostly. We slept in dry washes by day. And Joseph went ahead and behind to watch the trail. She rode well after the first day. She had ridden as a girl, she told me later. Her father had been a horse trader before he was a drunk, and her hands remembered. On the second night she began to talk, not all at once, in pieces. The way a person tells a thing when they have not been allowed to tell it for a long time, and the words come up in the wrong order. She was 28. She had been in the prison 3 years and 4 months. She had been put there for the killing of her husband, she had done, with a kitchen knife, in the 3rd year of their marriage. On a night when he had broken her left arm at the wrist for the 2nd time in 8 months, and she had decided, while he was asleep with his back to her, that there was not going to be a 3rd time. She had been tried in 2 days. Her lawyer had been drunk. The judge had given her 20 years instead of hanging her because she was small and pretty. And the foreman of the jury was a man who had known her mother 20 years. She had served 3. She had 17 left. The matron's name was Hester Mullen. The matron had taken a particular interest in Mary from her 2nd week, because Mary had what the matron called a look, meaning, Mary said, that she did not break easily. And the matron liked best the ones that did not break easily, because breaking them was the work, and the work was what the matron loved. The matron beat her on Sundays. Because Sundays, the chaplain came, and the chaplain talked about the love of God. And the matron found this funny, and beating a woman who had just heard about the love of God was the matron's joke with herself. Mary told me this on the second night, sitting against a cottonwood, with the firelight on half her face. In the same flat voice she would have used to tell me what she had eaten for breakfast. The voice was the part that made me get up and walk 100 yards into the dark and stand there with my hands on my knees breathing through my mouth until I could come back. When I came back, she said, "I am sorry," I said. "For what?" she said. "For making you hear it." And I sat down across from her and I said the only thing I could think of, which was, "You did not make me hear anything. I came and got you out of there." Hearing is the smallest part. She looked at me for a long time across the coals. The chip in her tooth showed because her mouth was a little open. She said, "Why did you?" And I told her the truth. I said, "Because 3 months ago I saw you walk past me in a street, and you looked at the wall the way a person looks who is not in her body anymore. And I rode away, and I could not stop thinking about it. And then I came back and I heard you on a Sunday, and I went home, and I could not sleep. And I am a chief of my people, and I have a wife, and a son, and a life, and I came anyway. I do not know how to explain it better than that," she said. "You have a wife," I said. "Yes." She said, "Does she know?" I said, "She knows I have done a thing." "She does not know what." She said, "Will you tell her?" I said, "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I do not know what to do with what you have done. I do not have anything to give back for it." And I said the thing I had been turning in my head for 3 days. I said, "You do not give anything back. That is not how this works. I did it because it needed doing. You owe me nothing. When we get to the place we are going, you will have a bed and a door that closes, and no one will come through it except who you say. And what you do after that is your own." She put her face in her hands again. This time she did cry, not loud, the way she did everything then. Quietly, like someone who had learned that loud was dangerous. I let her. I put another stick on the fire, and I let her. After a while she stopped, and she wiped her face on the cuff of the coat I had given her, and she looked up at me and she said, "What is your name?" I told her. She tried to say it. She said it badly, the way white people did, and she knew she had said it badly, and she laughed a little. The chip in the tooth showed. It was the first time I had seen her smile. I think it was the first time anyone had seen her smile in 3 years and 4 months. I will tell you something I have not told anyone. In that moment, looking at her across that fire, with the chip showing and her eyes wet and her cropped hair sticking up under the brim of the hat I had given her, I felt not what you might think, not what a young man would feel. I felt something older and harder and quieter than that. I felt the feeling a man feels when he has done a thing that was correct. Just that. Correct. Like a door that fits its frame. There was no want in it. There was no plan. There was only the feeling of a thing rightly done, and of a person, across a fire, who was going to live now. And who was going to live because of what I had decided to do on a Sunday, 3 weeks before, in an alley behind a stone wall. That feeling is what I have come to mean when I say the word honor, late in my life. Not the white men's word, not the soldier's word, the word that means. I stood up when it was time to stand up, that word. I will not pretend I did not also notice that she was beautiful. I am an honest man, I noticed. But what I noticed mostly that night was that she was alive, and that I had made that happen, and the rest of it was nothing. We came to Buffalo Grouse's camp on the morning of the 4th day. It was a small place. 6 lodges and a sod house Buffalo Grouse had built with his own hands when his wife had wanted walls. High country, broken, hard to come at on horseback from any side except one. And that side could be watched from a ridge by a child with a horn, creek with watercress in it, cottonwoods, a view east that went forever. Buffalo Grouse came out to meet us. He looked at me. He looked at Mary in her too big coat on the gray gelding. He looked back at me. He said, in our tongue, So this is the debt called in, I said. This is it, he said. Bring her in, the sod house. My wife's sister died last spring. The house has been empty. It is hers. And that is how Mary Halloran came to have her own bed. It was a small bed, iron frame, a straw tick mattress that Buffalo Gruce's wife had stuffed fresh that morning. When she saw us coming on the ridge, pillow with a clean cotton cover. 2 wool blankets, 1 gray with a black stripe and a small burn near the corner, Army issue. I had brought myself from my own house in my saddlebag because I had wanted her to have a thing that was a gift and not a thing taken from someone else's life. And 1 striped trade blanket from Buffalo Grouse's wife, red and black and yellow, very old and very good. The sod house had 1 room, a door that closed, a window with a piece of greased paper across it that let the light in soft, a small stove, a table, chair, the bed in the corner, under the window. When I showed it to her, she stood in the middle of the room, with her hands held in front of her the way she had held them when they were tied, even though they were not tied anymore. And she looked at the bed, and she did not move. I said, "This is yours." She did not say anything. I said, "The door has a latch on the inside. No one comes in unless you say." She did not say anything. I said, "I am going to go now. Buffalo Grouse's wife will bring you food in a little while. Her name is Wichapi. Star. She does not speak English, but she is a good woman. If you need me, I am in the next lodge over, the one with the painted door." I turned to go. She said, "Wait." I stopped. She said, Could you stay until I sit down on it?" I do not. I have not slept in a bed since I was 25 years old. I would like someone to be in the room when I sit down on it the first time. "I know that is a thing," I said. "It is not strange." I stood by the door. She walked to the bed. She sat on the edge of it. She put her hand on the gray blanket with the black stripe. She smoothed it once. Her hand was shaking, just a little, the way an old man's hand shakes. And she was not old. She was 28. But her hand shook that way because of what had been done to it for 3 years and 4 months. She smoothed the blanket again. She lay back, slow, like she was afraid the bed would not hold her. She put her head on the pillow. She closed her eyes. She said, "Oh, just that. Oh." The way a person says it when they have walked into a warm room out of cold weather they did not know was cold until it stopped. I stood in the doorway, and I watched her, and I did not feel young or old or proud or anything in particular. I felt the way you feel when a thing is finished. Not the thing finished. The thing was not finished. There was years of it left. The part I had been carrying since I had ridden away from her in that street. That part was finished. I had put her down somewhere safe. I had given her her own bed. After a minute, she opened her eyes, and she looked at me, and she said, "Thank you." I said, "You are welcome, Mary." I went out, and I shut the door behind me, and I heard the latch slide, on her side, and I stood there for one breath listening to it, and then I went to find Buffalo Grouse. I rode home the next day. I told my wife. I told her everything. Sitting at our table in our log house, with the stove ticking, and her cup of coffee in front of her, I told her about the street and the bell and the alley and the file and the 4th step, from the top and the sod house and the bed. I told her I had not touched the woman. I told her I would not. I told her I had used Wolf's plan and Always Hands and Joseph's Road and Buffalo Grouse's debt, and that they had all been part of it because I had asked them to be, and that the agency would come, and we needed to be ready. She listened all the way through without interrupting me, which was her way. When I was finished, she said, "Did you do it because she was pretty?" I said, "No." She said, "Did you do it because she was white?" I said, "No. I did it because I heard her, and a man who hears that and does not move is not a man." She was quiet a long time. Then she said, "Is she going to be your second wife?" I said, "No." She said, "Is she going to be anything to you?" I said, "She is going to be a person I helped, who lives in another camp 3 days' ride away, Amphrephis, and I will see her perhaps twice a year to bring her what she needs. And otherwise she is her own." My wife looked at me across the table for a long time. She had a way of looking that went into a man and turned things over to see what was underneath them. She was looking like that now. Then she said, "Good," and she got up and she poured me more coffee and she said, "Next time you bring her here. I want to see what kind of woman is worth nearly getting my husband hanged." That is how my wife was. That is why I had married her at 19 and stayed with her until she died 41 years later. She was not soft. She was not jealous in the small way. She was a woman who told a hard thing, looked at it straight, and decided what to do about it. And the next spring, when the agency had stopped looking, and they did stop, exactly the way Wolf said they would, because to them, Mary was worth less than the trouble. I brought Mary to our camp for a week, and my wife taught her how to tan a hide, and how to say good morning in our tongue, and how to braid her hair, which had grown out by then, and the two of them sat by my wife's fire for 7 evenings talking. And what they talked about I do not know to this day, because neither of them ever told me, and I had the sense not to ask. The agency did come. Not for her. They never connected her to us. The woman who had broken out of the prison was a white woman, and white people in those days could not believe a white woman would have gone off with Indians on purpose, and so the story they told themselves was that she had bribed a guard and run east. They looked east. They did not look west and north into broken country with a Lakota Sihasapa man's lodge on a ridge, above a creek with watercress in it, but they came about other things. They came about beef. They came about the school. They came about a young man in our band who had been drunk in town. They came about a horse that was not stolen, but was said to be. They came the way they always came in those years, small visits, small insults, small papers, and each time I sat in the hot room with the wet handshake men, and I signed nothing I did not have to sign, and I gave nothing I did not have to give, and I went home. Mary lived in the sod house for 3 years. Buffalo grouse and Weechoppy watched out for her. Weechoppy taught her our tongue, and she learned it fast because she had nothing else to do and because she had a good ear. Buffalo grouse taught her to set snares for rabbits and to find the watercress in the creek and to read weather off the ridge. By the second winter she was helping with the cattle. By the third she had her own small herd, 6 head, that buffalo grouse had given her out of his own, out of respect for what she had survived and out of friendship for me. In the 3rd year a man came through the camp, a Sihasapa widower, my age, named Takanka Huteko, Blue Buffalo Leg, a quiet man with grown sons and a kindness in his face. And he saw her, and she saw him. And the thing that happens between people who have both lost a great deal and recognize it in each other happened between them. Slowly, over the next 2 winters, with no haste on either side. In the 5th year she married him, in our way. I rode up for it. My wife rode with me. Mary wore the deer-hide dress Weechoppy had made for her, and her hair was long again, in 2 braids, and the chip in her tooth showed when she smiled. She did, often, that day, and many days after. She had 3 children with Blue Buffalo Leg, 2 girls and a boy. The boy she named after me, with my permission, which she asked for properly, the way our people ask, with tobacco. The girls she named for her own mother and for Weechoppy. She lived to be 71. She died of pneumonia in a winter when many died. Blue Buffalo Leg had gone 2 years before her. Son, the boy with my name, sat with her at the end. He told me later that she had asked him, at the very end, to bring her the gray blanket with the black stripe, and the small burn near the corner, and to put it over her. And he had, and she had said, oh, the way she had said it the first time, she had lain down on her own bed, in the sod house 43 years before, and then she had closed her eyes and not opened them again. He brought the blanket back to me afterward. He said, she wanted you to have it back. She said you would know what to do with it. I have had it in the chest at the foot of my bed for 19 years now. My wife knew what it was. She never asked me to put it away. When she died, 5 years after Mary, I put her wedding shawl in the chest beside the blanket, and they have been there together since. And that is right, I think. That is the right place for them. I told you, see, I almost did not keep my word to Wolf about the matron. I went back once. 18 months after the night we took Mary out. I had been thinking about it the whole time. And I told my wife I was going, and she said, "Do not kill her. Killing her brings them back to us." And I said I would not kill her. I went on a Sunday. I wore the same coat and hat. I stood on the boardwalk across the street from the prison gate at the hour the line came out. The line came out. There were new women in it, and some of the old ones, and the matron in her black dress with her keys. The same. She did not see me. She would not have known me if she had. I stood there and I looked at her, and I thought about what I could do. About a knife in an alley, about a fire at the prison wall, about a long shot from a ridge a half-mile off with a Sharps rifle borrowed from Joseph. And I thought about Wolf saying, "They will not stop until they find us." And I thought about my wife and my son and Mary, in her sod house, with her 6 head of cattle and her hair growing out and blue buffalo leg, who had not yet come through the camp, but was on his way to her, in some future I could not yet see, and I did not do it. I will tell you why I am not ashamed of not doing it. Because the matron was not the thing. The matron was a sick woman who had been allowed to be sick because the world she lived in let her. If I killed her, there would be another matron in the black dress, with the keys in a year. Killing her would have been for me. It would not have been for Mary. Mary was already out. Mary was already sitting in a Psnahat house 3 days' ride north and west learning to say good morning in our tongue. Killing the matron would not have given Mary anything Mary did not already have. And it would have taken from my people the safety I had spent 18 months making sure they kept. So I turned my horse and I went home. I never went back to that town. I heard a few years later that the matron had died of a stroke in her sleep in the room above the back gate where the stovepipe smoked every morning. And I heard it, and I did not feel anything in particular about it. She had had her life, and she had used it the way she had used it, and now she was done. And the world was a small amount lighter, and that was all. So that is the story of the blanket. I am 86 years old. My wife has been gone 15 years. My son, and has his own grandchildren. The boy that was named after me, Mary's son, is 53, and ranches on the same broken country his mother lived on, and he visits me twice a year, and we sit on the porch and we do not say much, because we do not have to, because everything that needed saying was said a long time ago. I think about Mary sometimes, not in a romantic way. Never thought about her in a romantic way. Even when she was young and I was not yet old, and a different kind of man might have, I think about her, the way a man thinks about a thing he did that he is glad he did. Like a fence post you set 40 years ago that is still standing. Like a fire you built in a bad winter that warmed people you did not even know would come to it. If you ask me what the best thing I ever did in this life was, I will tell you it was not being chief, and it was not raising my son, and it was not staying married to a good woman for 41 years, though all of those were good things, and I am proud of them. It was a Tuesday before dawn in the 9th month of 1881, in the mud behind a stone wall, with a file in my hand, and always crouched beside me, and a small woman 3 years and 4 months past, the last time she slept in a real bed waiting someone to come and tell her she was allowed to leave. I went and I told her, and then I gave her her own bed, and then I gave her her own life, by stepping back out of it, which is the part most men forget. That giving a thing means giving it, not standing there waiting to be thanked, not coming back to admire what you gave. You give it, and you turn around, and you go home to your wife, and you live your life, and the gift gets to be a gift. The blanket is still folded the way I folded it that first night. 43 years she slept under it. 19 years it has been back in my chest. When I am gone, my son will know what to do with it. I have told him. He will take it to Mary's boy, and Mary's boy will keep it for his own children, and so on, until one day it is a piece of gray wool with a black stripe and a small burn that no one remembers the meaning of, and that is all right. That is how all things go. The meaning goes out of them, and the thing remains. Ain't. And the thing is enough. The thing was always enough. It was always, from the first second I saw her barefoot in the street. Exactly enough. That is what I wanted to tell you. Now I am going to sit a while. The light is good on the porch this time of day. You go on.